What's going on, everybody, and welcome again to another Facts Project podcast. Today's very special guest, obviously, if you've read this particular book, Bitterroot, obviously it was, of course, the best continuing series Eisner winner 2020, 2022, Chuck Brown, Sanford Green, and this gentleman, who I'm happy to have back on the podcast. Last year, we got a chance to talk about the death of Bobby Hart as a tribute, of course, to Donald Goines. And today, we are talking about the Monster of Blackenstyne. Thank you for being here, David Walker.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back. It's like it's almost a year to the right. Like I'm realizing that just now because Bobby Hart was about a year ago, and that was. I swore to myself afterwards, I can't do this no more. You know, I'm like Danny Glover in Lethal Weapon. I'm like, I'm too old for this, and here I am doing it again.
That's all right. Look, but the thing is, I feel as though with the actual language and literature that you're able to put out, it's always gravitating for the concepts that you come up with. Because take, for instance, of course, this particular book. Yeah. You're taking a mixture of classic horror movies versus blaxploitation, which I feel as though is probably two distinctive loves of yours. And
yes,
now this has basically come to fruition in this particular book. And now, obviously, I'm sure you've been on the podcast circuit and people have talked about those inspirations for you and where they've stood out. But I will go a little bit more in depth because there was this one tagline that I felt as though made this so much more compelling, especially in a blaxploitation manner. You had had the headline, usually what you saw in a blaxploitation film, especially on the poster. It says, "He was just a man until the man made him a monster." And I was like, that stands out more than anything. As far as social commentary, and we wanted to put that on the page, like, for one, how long did it take to get that tagline? For two, how big of a font did you really want to put on the front of there?
It's funny because I hadn't thought about having a tagline for the longest time, right? And we have a cover by Joe Jusko, legendary Joe Jusko. And when I started talking to him about it, he has some similar sensibilities. And I was like, I'd like to see something that's reminiscent of a blaxploitation movie poster, but also we were talking very specifically about the Sonny Chiba movie, The Street Fighter. And so we were talking about that, and he sent me this preliminary sketch, and I was like, it was so dope. And I was like, oh, but this doesn't have a tagline. And then the moment I said that to myself, this doesn't have a tagline, like it came immediately. Like normally something like that would take forever, but I felt like this had written itself, to be 100% honest with you.
Right.
And again, I know so many of the taglines from so many of them blaxploitation movies, and I've got the original posters, I've got reproductions, I've got books with all that stuff in it. So it was and what I really was thinking about was how would it sound if there's an actor named Adolf Caesar, and Adolf Caesar did the voiceover for a lot of the trailers back in the day. And I was like, what would it sound like if Adolf Caesar said, he was just a man until the man made him a monster. And I was like, that's it. Like it worked, So you're the first person to really mention that one, right? And it's also, when you look at a lot of especially Marvel comics from the 70s, there was a lot of times there'd be a tagline or some sort of slogan within the title. So Daredevil was always the man without fear, that sort of stuff. So, man, that was it. It was, when I say that this is a project that really just in a lot of ways wrote itself.
Yeah.
It was, it was 2 or 3 different ideas that were kicking around in my head. And nobody wants to believe me when I say this, but it's true. There is a movie from 1973 called Blackenstyne, and it's arguably one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life, right?
Right.
It's not even so bad it's good. It is just so bad it's bad. And when I say I hate this movie, like, I hate that movie, right? So much so that I have spent years obsessing over how much I hate it,
Right.
right? And one night I was laying in bed, this is about 4 years ago, couldn't sleep, and I was like, man, I hate Blackenstein. I hate that movie, and I like, and then all of a sudden this idea popped in my head, and it was like, well, why don't you do a Blackenstein comic? Why don't you reinvent that character? Rodney Barnes had done Blackula, and
Yeah.
and he was doing the actual Blackula. He licensed that character. Um, and I was like, well, I don't want to do the character from the movie. And I was like, well, okay, so let me change the spelling. I did that, and in about an hour, I'd come up with the character design, the
Yeah.
spelling, and then the story itself. And that was like about 4 years ago. And now it's finally ready to be out there in the world.
And to be honest, I can't wait to read it. As a matter of fact, the artwork on it is absolutely fantastic as well. Because what is that? I think the gentleman's name is Marcelo Di Chiara.
Di Chiara, yeah, Marcello Di Chiara, yeah.
Fantastic work that he did. Like the black and white version that you put up as the limited edition,
Yeah.
as well as the color. Good God, it's amazing to look at. It's especially almost like in a grayscale type of way how that limited edition came out.
Yeah, no, that's super dope too. That was Pedro Estouco was the colorist on that. And I had gotten so used to looking at Marcello's art in black and white.
Hmm.
And I knew I wanted to do this as a color book for sure. And when the color started coming in, it looked great. I was
Yeah,
like, yes. But there's part of me, I really love black and white comics, right?
yeah,
I won't say I was raised on them because I wasn't supposed to read those. I wasn't supposed to be reading Savage Sword of Conan and things like that when I was a kid,
hmm,
but I still did. And so I was looking at the colors, and a similar thing had happened with the death of Bobby Hart,
yeah.
where I was like, yo, I'm putting these out myself, and can't anybody tell me what I can and can't do. So I'm gonna do a black and white version. But then I went one step further and realized, oh, what would be dope is if it was silent,
Yeah.
right? If there was no words in it. And so you get this because I ain't gonna lie, man, Blackenstein is the most overwritten comic most people will ever read in their lives. It's overwritten as if intentionally. It's meant to be a
Right.
satire. Um, but as I was lettering it, and I love lettering my own work, but you live with the art so much longer when you do that. You're
Hmm.
studying it, you're getting the page set up. And there was a moment where the lettering was on a separate layer, and I for whatever reason I turned that layer off, and I was just looking at the art, and I was like, yo, wait a minute, it's like the words aren't needed.
Hmm.
Um, I'm gonna do a version without the words, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's how that one happened too. This has been a wild ride in terms of my self-publishing adventures. It's been one of the wildest rides.
Yeah, like you talked about Rodney Barnes taking over the licensing for Blackula and obviously doing a retelling. The title obviously evokes Frankenstein.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Now, what were you most interested in reinterpreting or challenging from that legacy? Obviously, the scientist has this driven ego to build this monster from multiple body parts. And
Yeah,
the creation just turns out to be something that he did not know was going to what it wasn't going to be.
yeah. Well, as a kid, I remember, because I'm older than dirt. Um, I remember seeing the James Whale's Frankenstein. That was the one that starred Boris Karloff. I remember seeing it
Yeah,
on TV in the 70s, probably like 5 years old, 6 years old, and it blew my mind, right?
yeah,
Like so many people, I fell in love with that monster. Um, but the thing that's always has always interested me about that story is the monster's not the monster, right? They
right.
call him the monster Frankenstein, but the real Frankenstein monster is the doctor himself,
Yeah.
right? And when a, any sort of Frankenstein story is done well, the monster is someone that you should be rooting for them, or at least you should feel some empathy for them when the villagers are coming at them with torches and all that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to explore that, but I also had for a long time really been thinking about the reality of when when we see someone like a George Floyd or a Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, I mean, it's a very long list of victims, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, nearly every single one of them is portrayed in the media in some sort of monstrous capacity, right?
Hmm.
They'll be like, oh, well, when, he shoplifted, a box of Fruity Pebbles when he was 14. Okay.
Right.
Does that excuse, he was selling Lucy cigarettes. Does that excuse him being choked to death by the police, right?
Right.
And so there's been a lot of anger for a very long time about that, this idea of what I would just call the monstrification of and it's not just black folks, it's not just people of color. We see it now with queer folks and with trans folks. We see them being portrayed by certain pockets of the media, and in some cases very large pockets,
Yeah.
as like there's something wrong with us. And it's like, no, it's the story that you're telling. It's how you're telling it. And that's ultimately what I wanted this to be, except I wanted it to be a comedy
Yeah.
with a lot of severed body parts and things like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was it.
Yeah, hence the tagline, because
Yeah,
initially, like basically how he's transforming into this,
yeah,
he wasn't always this.
yeah,
So when we're talking about the story, it suggests a man who's turned into a monster by systemic forces.
yeah.
What essentially are you trying to say about power, control, and identity all in one?
Well, if I answer that question, then there's no room for interpretation from the
True.
reader, right? Um, going back to what I was saying about the Frankenstein monster, um, I don't. I used to think I was a very weird kid
Hmm.
because I always like that monster in particular. I always related to him,
Yeah.
right? But I also related to like King Kong because I was like, yo, King Kong was minding his own business, and
Hmm.
then these people come to the island, and the
And
next thing you
snatch
know,
him
he's
up.
shot. Yeah, and so to me, I always empathized with the monster. And again, I thought I was really weird. I thought literally me and my cousin were the only two people who thought this way.
Yeah.
Then the older I got, the more I started meeting other film nerds and comic book nerds, and I started to realize, oh no, there's a universality to some of this thought process for some of us.
Right.
And that's really what I was trying to touch upon. I was trying to touch upon this idea of, what it feels like to be thought of as a monster
Hmm.
when the monster doesn't think of itself. The Godzilla don't think of it as I don't know if Godzilla is a he or a she or a them,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm saying, right? Um, Godzilla is just Godzilla. Godzilla's minding Godzilla's own business. Same thing with oh, what was it? There was another one I watched, another classic I watched recently, uh Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Okay.
I watched that very recently, and it's like it's always like
Infiltration.
it's infiltration or people like Dr. Frankenstein ain't got no business trying to bring the dead back
Yeah,
to life,
exactly.
right? And then when he does, he's like, "Oh no, what did I do?" And it's like, "You know what you did."
Yeah.
Right? Like and so there's a lot to do with accountability. And I think that I like when the story starts to get into the perspective or starts to give humanity to something that seems inhuman. And that was when I watched Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein when it dropped. Uh, I found myself, I really liked the movie a lot for sure,
Yeah.
but I found myself not really being that engaged until you got to the second half when the narrative switched the perspective and suddenly you're getting the monster story.
Right.
Um, and I was like, okay, now you got me. Now I'm not hitting pause every 20 minutes and getting up and, getting popcorn or whatnot. And so I just think there's a lot to be said for, having empathy, or it's like or as the Rolling Stones said, sympathy for the devil, right?
Yeah.
So
There is a sense of like audacity in those type of films. I even take it a little bit further. King Kong
yeah.
lives. King
Okay.
Kong
Yeah.
lives from the 80s. They
Yeah.
actually gave they King Kong had fallen from the Empire State Building.
Yeah.
They give him an artificial heart to revive him just to
Yeah.
kill him again.
Yeah. Yeah. That's you may be the only person who ever watched that movie,
I
by the way.
that would
It's
be yeah, that's me. I was a child. I love that movie.
yeah, no, I was it's but that's the thing, right? The all of these it's interesting to me how many people it was interesting to me when I started meeting people who related to the monsters, right?
Hmm.
And fall in love with the monsters. And it's more than I think I could have ever comprehended when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But then what is crazy to me is like the people who either don't get it or the people who relate to the monsters. Because what really happened in the 80s, there was a shift. Late 70s, early 80s, and we started getting characters like Freddy Krueger
Yeah.
and you ain't supposed to relate to them. You're not supposed to empathize with them, but
Hmm.
then they turn them into these sort of comedic foils, and he's
Yeah.
Freddy's got these one-liners. And I remember, because I was like in my late teens, early 20s. I remember I was in high school when the first like two of those movies dropped. But I was like, we're not supposed to like Freddy. We're not supposed to be rooting for him.
Right.
And so in a lot of ways I love the idea of reclaiming and redefining who the monster is. And we're really going to get into who the monster is as I start producing more Blackenstein stories because there's going to be more of them.
Oh, can't wait. Now you talk about how the satire moments of this particular
Yeah.
book and how it blends horror, satire of obviously the blaxploitation influence. Now, how are you able to just balance these tones all within this book? Being as how it's a one shot.
It wasn't easy.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy. It was, I came up with the story first, the basic story. I wanted to keep it really simple. I drew a lot of inspiration from a lot of mostly what Marvel was doing in the 70s.
Mm,
And Marvel had a couple titles like Marvel Spotlight, Marvel Premiere, where they would do these one shots. They would introduce a character, and they did this with like it's how they introduced Ghost Rider. It's how they introduced Werewolf by Night. It's
yeah.
how they introduced a lot of those characters. Son of Satan, and so I was looking to those um, for a certain amount of inspiration, and I was like, because the nature of self-publishing is so difficult and crowdfunding is so difficult, and I've already made this mistake twice. I decided, okay, I'm gonna self-publish this thing, and it's all the story is gonna fit in a single issue.
Hmm.
But I'm hoping people will want more of the character and more of his story. And so I treated it like the pilot episode of a TV show or what Marvel was doing in the 70s. And so I came up with a really basic plot that I knew could fit into anywhere between 20 to 24 pages. Um, and I broke it down like I would anything else. And and then I started writing the script. And I always knew, let's have a lot of room for dialogue. I want to do this, narration, very 70s style.
Yeah.
I did a proof of concept short with I had hired an artist to draw it. That allowed me to work out some of the kinks, and to make sure it was going to work. If I can make it work in 8 pages, I'll be able to make it work in 24. And then if I can make it work in 24 pages, I'll be able to make a longer story work.
Right.
And then I was looking at how the industry is right now, especially for indie creators, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna have to keep everything short, right? Because I'm paying for this stuff out of my own pocket right now.
Yeah.
Um, and so again, that's when I started looking to uh, both eerie and creepy. Those are by Warren Publications. But then I started looking at a lot of the EC stuff from the 50s and 60s. So I was looking at short form storytelling. And then on top of that,
Yeah.
I started looking at like that short form storytelling uh, in Marvel also did this in the 70s with titles like Deadly Hands of Kung Fu and Vampire Tales. There'd be shorter chapters in these black and white magazines, and it might be 10 pages or 12 pages. And then it would be to be continued, a month later or 2 months later when the next issue came out. And so this gave me an opportunity. In fact, you might not be able to see because I got the background blur on, but like this is uh this is Tales from the Zombie number shit, I don't know what number it is. Um, but like this is one of those magazines that I studied, and I
Yeah.
had some of these as a kid too.
Is that like
Um,
the almost like the old creep show books, the old like Tales from the Crypt type of books where they were like anthologies, but more so like vignettes?
yeah, so like Tales or this one here, Tales from the Zombie had, and again, I don't know how many issues there were, but there would be like a main story, there'd be some backup stories, and it would have like a creep show, Tales from the Crypt vibe.
Hmm.
But in some of these publications, uh, there would be stories that would spread out over multiple issues, right?
Yeah.
Deadly Hands of Kung Fu had it. Vampire Tales had it. I want to say Monsters Unleashed had it. Again, Marvel had this like all these things, and so I would. The only one my mom wouldn't buy me when I was a kid was Savage Sword of Conan, but all the others she would buy me, and that was because Savage Sword of Conan had titties in it. That
Oh
was why
yeah.
she would, you know.
They had
Uh,
the loincloth
yeah,
was a muck.
yeah. Um, But the thing I loved about those magazines also was they all had articles in them about
Yeah.
different things, right? And so I loved um, just reading those articles and I loved the short stories, but I also loved that serialized um, that serialized storytelling as well. And I was this is something I've been playing at, or I shouldn't say playing at, that I've been thinking about for a really long time. How would I do this? How could I make this work? And I didn't have a character
Yeah.
to build this sort of storytelling around yet. And then when Blackenstyne came to me, then the initial story came to me, and then all these other things started coming to me. Supporting characters, stories you could tell, stories, ways I could collaborate with other creators to tell bigger stories.
Yeah.
And then the other one that I really looked at too, there was two other more contemporary titles, was I looked at Hellboy. I looked at like what Mike Mignola has done with Hellboy
Yeah.
and was really inspired by that. And when I say contemporary, I mean Hellboy is like what almost 40 years old. So he ain't
True.
that new. And the Goon, Eric Powell's The Goon,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
was another one that I looked at and I was like, okay, this is I see so many creators, we've been conditioned to want to tell these big epic tales that last for hundreds and hundreds of issues.
Yeah.
Most of us ain't got the money to produce that, right?
Hmm.
And so I was like, yeah, I want to tell something that you could get the one shot of Blackenstein, or you could get this 8 page short that's being drawn right now as we speak. You could read any story, you could drop in anywhere. It's always going to make sense, and you're just going to have a good time. And you're over time, he's going to become your new hero.
True. Now, would you feel as though, in the midst of comics nowadays, is there just a lack of character building? Uh,
I don't want to go that far. But what I do think is that so I teach part-time. I teach at Portland State University in their
mhm.
comic studies program.
Yeah.
And my students always come in and they're like, yo, I want to tell this. I got this story. And they'll be like, and it's about twin elves and they're separated at birth. And one is raised in the kingdom of light and the other is raised in the kingdom of darkness and da da da. And they'll be like, they'll give me like a 10-minute explanation. And then they go, and now this is where our story starts. And I'm like, then why'd you tell me all that? Right. Like I didn't need to know any of this. Um, and I come back to, uh, all the time. There's 3 or 4 movies that I refer to that I saw when I was really young,
Yeah.
and like one of those was or two of them were John Carpenter movies, right? One was Escape from New York,
Yeah.
and the other was The Thing,
Hmm.
right?
Both Kurt
And
Russell. Both
yep,
great.
both Kurt Russell, and there was a moment in Escape from New York where, and not as multiple moments, where everybody who meets Kurt Russell, they meet Snake Plissken, and they say to him, "You're Snake Plissken? I
Hmm.
heard you were dead."
Right.
And I'm like probably 13, 14 watching this movie for the first time, and I'm going, "Yo, wait a sec. Who is this dude? And why does everyone think he's dead? Like,
Right.
how is he so well known?" Um, and the thing is, they never really answer that question. They
No.
never go into that. And that movie and that style of storytelling came along at an age where I was really, really, my brain was really malleable. I was really open to inspiration. And then, the thing came out, I think a year or two later. And in watching that movie, I was way too young to be seeing that one when it came out, but I watched it anyway.
Hmm.
Um, it was like it dawned on me, do all these dudes that are at the outpost, we don't even know, most of them, we don't know their full
No
names.
names.
We don't know, are they married? Do they have kids? Some of them, we don't even know what their job at the outpost is, right?
Yeah,
And yet you're still engrossed. You're still brought in.
true.
And so I often think about, for myself, when I'm writing, I know a lot about my characters. I might know everything. I know, what do they like, two-ply toilet paper or one-ply toilet paper, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean I'm going to give it to the reader. It doesn't mean that the reader needs to know it, right?
it's true.
And so I think about that a lot. I think about, and I tell my students this. It's like, you know, part of your job as a creator is to let the audience participate in it.
Yeah,
Let them fill in some of the blanks, right? And I go back to, because I'll tell you a movie that does it perfectly. They have a perfect mix of like expository, I call it expository dumping, and then leaving it to the audience is Sinners, right?
yeah.
Because, we kind of know where Smoke and Stack got all that liquor from, but we
Hmm.
don't know
We
exactly
don't
what
know.
happened, you
We know
know?
he worked for Capone in
Yeah,
Chicago.
yeah.
Might have been
And that's about
bootlegging.
it.
That's about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Could have
That's
been.
it. And like the Choctaw Indians show up and we don't know
We don't
nothing about
nothing.
them.
They
And
leave
then
and
they're
that's it.
gone. Yeah.
That's it.
And I was like, part of me was infuriated because I was like, I want more of them.
Yeah, I wanted to expand about that.
Yeah.
But
But
yet
I
it was
was,
like I was also feeling like it was myself. I was feeling like it was justified. I was like, they know what's up. And they
yeah,
got up out of Dodge.
yeah. They were like, my man's like, yeah, it's
Son,
getting dark. We out.
it's getting dark. I'll see you guys
It's,
later.
did you let if he's in the house right now? Oh, it's
Hmm.
over,
Yeah.
So,
And it allowed the
um,
audience to have that commentary
yeah.
themselves.
And it was, Coogler, man, he earned that Oscar for best original screenplay because it was like when when Smoke and Annie, when they reunited, and just talking about the mojo bag,
Hmm.
and she's saying, don't think that mojo bag didn't work for you because all them things you and your brother are off doing. And then he says, well, then how come the magic didn't save our baby?
Right.
And he didn't, like, he asks her a question that tells us, the audience, all these things that we need to know. He
Yeah.
doesn't say, well, the reason I left was because you were pregnant and you had my baby and then the baby died and I didn't know how to
It was
handle
a
it.
one
And
liner.
yeah, yep. And that's I think that we've reached a point in storytelling where, in part, the problem is, especially in film, where you have these marketing departments who, there was a time when they felt you couldn't make superhero movies and they couldn't make money and no one wanted to see superheroes in costumes, right?
Correct.
Um, which is why when you look at especially Tim Burton's Batman, you see more of Michael Caine out of the costume than you see in the costume, right?
Yeah.
Um, but and it was the reason why it took forever for someone to make a Spider-Man movie, because everyone in Hollywood kept saying, no, you gotta see his face. You can't. And it's like, no, there's a way to do this, right?
Right.
But this in Hollywood, the assumption is that the audience is really dumb.
Yeah.
And so, and don't get me wrong, because a lot of the audience is
It,
dumb, you know
true.
that, right? So,
Yeah.
um, but what happens when you make that assumption is then you dumb it down for them,
Yeah.
and that can become lazy. That can become lazy storytelling. You can tell a whole lot about a character, sometimes with a line of dialogue, sometimes with no dialogue, right? I mean, John Wick was great with that, where it was like, whose car did you steal? He stole John Wick's car. Oh, okay, that's it.
Oh,
You got to give that car back, right? That says more than saying, well,
mhm.
let us tell you about him.
They're like,
We
why
follow
is
him.
everybody so scared right now?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right.
And that, I think that brings a certain type of audience to the fold, but I think it brings in more people than not,
Yeah.
right? And what happens is people think they want something, and then you give it to them, and it's like I didn't need no Han solo movie,
Yeah.
right? I
No.
wasn't the one clamoring for it, but someone thought it was a good idea, and it was
Mhm.
like, no, I like not knowing much about his background. I don't need to know how him and Chewbacca met. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah. So
Yeah. I'll even expound upon that even further. Trailers. Trailers,
yes.
the revealings of like a teaser trailer, a full length
Yeah.
trailer, and so on and so forth. Like when you talked about John Carpenter, also in the
Yeah.
same breath, Big Trouble in Little China. If you saw, there was like probably maybe one teaser trailer for that film, and you thought
Yeah.
Kurt Russell was a badass in that movie until you watched the movie, and he's a whole idiot the
Yeah. He's a
entire time.
buffoon. Yes,
He's
he is.
literally
Yes.
a nutcase the entire time. And he's not the hero. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, the only reason that he became the hero in the end is got lucky.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. And that was, and I love that movie too, because it's like, you don't know why Jack Burton and oh
Wang.
God, Wang, you don't even know like really how they're friends, why they're
No.
friends, how they know each other, right? And it's just, and that's the thing I love about that movie, is that has the same kind, a similar type of dialogue where they'll drop stuff on not David Lopan, the man who is da 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 da,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh,
The
they're
eight
doing
hundred
that.
year old man or the 8 foot
Yeah,
tall robot.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I love Carpenter had a streak there, for a solid streak for a very long time, and you can go back to Halloween. You can even go back to before Halloween. I would throw in Assault on Precinct 13 there, then Halloween, The Fog, which I think is underrated,
Hmm.
Escape from New York, The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China. I think Prince of Darkness
Yeah.
is really dope. And then things start, and Starman is a solid movie too. Then things start to spiral a little bit for him,
Hmm.
and I went back recently and rewatched Vampires, and I was like, oh yo, this movie's just terrible, right? But I love Ghosts of Mars, even though everyone else
Oh
hates it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
I I,
Ice Cube.
I
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Ice Cube trying to be Kurt Russell is
Man.
one of the funniest things you've ever seen, and um I'll tell you, if I don't condone uh, the use of cannabis, but I will say that if you consume enough cannabis and
You
watch Ghosts of Mars, it is possible to mentally project Kurt Russell
Russell in that role.
onto the TV and imagine him saying all that dialogue that Cube is
Right.
saying, and it works.
It
It
had to be a
works.
scheduling conflict. Was he doing Tango and Cash at the same time? I don't know.
I don't know. I've read some stuff that at one point that was supposed to be a Snake Plissken movie. They were talking about
Oh,
that or whatever.
okay.
Um, I watched that movie, and I've never met John Carpenter, and I could be wrong about this, but when I watch it, every time I watch it, I'm like, yo, this is a dude who just didn't want to be making movies anymore, right? And but it is so. I probably watch that movie at least once every 2 to 3 months.
No
And
kidding.
and I usually never get all the way through it either. I get to a certain point and I'm like, yo, this movie is like, I can't do this to myself anymore. And then I turn it off. And
Yep.
then 2, 3 months later, I turn it back on again. And I have most of it memorized, man. In fact, this is a true story, man. The way the monster in the Monster of Blackenstyne speaks is inspired by the Ghosts of Mars, because there's this whole bit where the Martian leader is like, he's screaming, he's like, "Wugga, bawunga, bugga, mugga, wugga,"
Yeah.
and it's like, well, clearly it's a language that is, there's no subtitles,
None.
right? And uh, and I just thought,
You just
okay,
know that
what?
means attack.
It means something, but really he's probably going, they have come to our planet and they have taken everything over, and therefore we shall crush them and eat their flesh. But it comes out, wah, 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 it's he sounds like the Tasmanian devil in Looney Tunes, bro. It's like, and I read somewhere that he had these fake teeth. The actor had it was a stuntman playing the head ghost.
Yeah.
Um, he's fake teeth that didn't fit properly, and so he was having trouble saying his "wugga wugga booga." I mean, it's
His
just
teeth kept falling out.
yeah, yeah. So,
Oh my
but yeah, I love me some Ghost of Mars, man. I love me.
God.
I'll probably watch it tonight. Now that we're talking
Now that
about
we're
it,
talking.
it's I love it so much. I'm not the sort of person who will. It's very rare that I have a movie say on DVD that I upgrade to Blu-ray. It's got to be something really
Okay.
special. And every time I watch my Ghost of Mars DVD, I'm like, is it time to upgrade? Is it
Yeah.
time to upgrade to Blu-ray? I might need a Blu-ray. I might need this movie. And then I hear my cousin and all my friends saying, "Man, why are you spending money on Ghosts of Mars, you idiot?"
You
So
don't get it. Now, am I remembering the female lead correctly? Wasn't Natasha Henstridge?
Natasha Henstridge, yes. And she is like the part of the beautiful thing about that movie is, and this comes back to, I believe that you should always leave enough to the audience that the audience has to interpret certain things, right?
Yeah.
So if we go back to Escape from New York, it's like, well, who is the Snake Plissken dude, and why does everyone think he's dead? Well, Ghost of Mars, every single aspect of it is open to interpretation, down
True.
to why did Natasha Henstridge take this part? Why did Ice
Yeah.
Cube take, it's like you're asking questions not even about the movie, the story, but like how that, like, who thought these special effects were good, right?
Yeah. This
So
train in the middle of Mars. Who thought of
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
background?
And Robert Carradine, God bless his soul, he just passed.
Yeah.
He's got like four lines in it, and man, he's terrible. He's like they put like cream strips or something in their coffee, and he says to his boss, "Here's your coffee with four strips of cream, just as you like it." And it was like, bro, you were really trying to earn that
Really,
paycheck,
really
weren't you?
exaggerated. Like he made sure he got his lines out.
But part of me loves that shit. And
Yeah.
the key is like, if you have fun with it, and some people say to me, oh, well, yeah, Ghost of Mars is so bad, it's good. And I'm like, no, no, it's just so good, it's good, right?
Yeah.
Like, Blackenstein is so bad, it's bad. The comic, or not the comic, the movie, my comic's
Movie.
dope. Yeah. So yeah,
Right.
the movie is, oh, maybe I'll watch that tonight too, though. I don't.
So, I don't know if you want to do that. You might burst your TV.
It's well, I've become obsessed with, I see the death of Bobby Hart behind you,
Yeah.
and that grew out of my obsession for the murder of Donald Goines,
Right.
which is never solved, has never been solved. Well, the producer of Blackenstein was also murdered, and that was never solved. And the dude who played the monster had been arrested and charged with first degree homicide, but he was acquitted by his lawyer. His lawyer got him acquitted, and his lawyer was the producer of the movie.
Oh my God.
And so there's like, there's a story there. At some point,
This, these
it's just,
ancient Hollywood tales, these are crazy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So we'll see. Maybe someday I'll do the true story of Blackenstein. I don't
Yeah,
know.
all that behind the scenes footage, I'm telling you.
Yeah,
Now, upon the stories that you tell,
yeah,
there's always this.
yeah.
And I heard that there's more of this coming.
We are trying to make that happen. It's, there's three of us. There's
Yeah.
Chuck, Sanford, and myself, and our schedules do not align ever. And so I was just talking to Sanford about a week. I talked to both Sanford and Chuck about a week ago, and we were like, trying to figure out how to do it, how to make it work.
Yeah.
And so we're always talking about it, um, and the other problem though is that and we discovered this with the next movement, which is the one that's up there
Yeah.
behind you.
Yep.
Um, sales on the next movement were okay, but they weren't what the previous books had been. And we all knew deep down inside, well, the reason why is because we're not putting the book out regularly enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the scheduling conflicts make it so difficult that, like, for all three of us, we need to treat Bitterroot like a full-time job. And we keep circumstances keep putting us into a position where it's more like a we're like the Eagles, the band the Eagles, where it's like, we get together and go on tour,
Yeah.
every 15 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
So but yeah, we're figuring it out, and I'm hoping that by this time next year, we'll have some stuff for people to see. But again, it's just like getting it all to align is and other people do it, and I don't know how. I don't know how they're able to do it. Other
Yeah.
teams.
It's just a matter of locking in, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Like now with the first edition being in the
yeah,
30s, this one
yeah.
being in the 60s. Is, am I allowed
Well,
to ask where you would jump to?
so the story there, the next movement, which takes place in the 60s, that's that's essentially the first act of a bigger story
Oh,
that we want to do. Chuck has already figured out the story, a part of the story that's in the 80s. So we would get, I'd say, like, the plan would be to do about 10 more issues that take place in the 60s, and then we would jump into the 80s. And Chuck has this great idea. He has a great character, the next generation of the Sangreal family, and it's early 80s. So it's
yeah.
um
Reagan era.
we're yeah, we'd be dealing with the Reagan era, we'd be dealing with hip hop, and we'd also be dealing with AIDS.
Yeah.
And so when I think about, oh man, we're so busy, we're too busy to do this, and then I'm like, well, we got to figure out a way to make it work. And one of the things we've only just barely started talking about it, but it's like, well, and this goes back to like Mike Mignola with Hellboy. It's like, well, why can't we, let's bring in some other people. But it primarily, and I understand why he doesn't want to do this. Um, Primarily would be talking about bringing in other artists to work on it.
Right.
And I have to respect Sanford
Oh yeah.
when, this is our baby, right?
Hmm.
And if he's fine with like some short stories here and there. We've been talking about doing that, but to actually, and I don't know how I would feel about doing, 10 issues and Sanford ain't drawn the main
Yeah.
story.
The aesthetic would. I'm
Yeah,
not going to say it's lost, but it would definitely
it'd be
be.
different.
It'd be a
And
different depiction.
what I even one of the suggestions I came up with moving forward was like, okay, let's do moving forward, let's do like the next 10 issues. Let's just have Sanford just draws, we write 10 to 12 page chapters, and Sanford draws those, and then we have a 10-page backup story, and that's drawn by a guest artist.
Hmm.
So I've said that, but that didn't land that well. So I think he wants to. I don't know. We'll see. I'll talk to him. I'll talk to him next week. I'll give him a call and suggest it again. But sometimes it's I still want Eric B. and Rakim to put out some new stuff together, and it just may never happen.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. We are going to do more Bitterroot. So
For sure, for sure. Now
yeah,
you talked about, of course, expanding even upon this particular book, even though it's a one
yeah,
shot, The Monster of
yeah.
Blackenstyne. Where do you go next? Do you go into more classic horror of other
Oh.
creatures? Is the creature of the Black Lagoon really from a black lagoon?
So we've got when I say we, it's mostly me, but there's so I'm moving forward, I'm going to be doing shorter stories um that will be seemingly self-contained, but they're telling a bigger story, right?
Yeah.
And so there's the monster, and then I'm going to, over the course of time, introduce other monsters and then have those monsters very much like the way Universal did it, right? First
Yeah.
they had Dracula, then they had Frankenstein, and then at some point Dracula and Frankenstein team up or
Yeah.
fight, and then the Wolfman.
Wolfman. Yep.
And so there's I have my vampire character, I have my Bride of the Monster character, I've got um I've got my version of a werewolf, which is the most offensive thing anyone has ever seen. And there's a backup story that's going to be in this Blackenstein comic that will introduce that character.
Mm.
Um, and to like even when I say it, I have trouble not cracking up, and everybody gets like, "There, what is that?" It's this story is called "The Curse of the Were Jig," and see, there you go.
I'm sorry. No, no, that's perfect.
Um, but my good friend John Jennings,
Yeah, yeah.
I was talking to John. I sent him a text maybe 2 weeks ago, and I said, "Yo, John, what do you think of this? The Monster of Blackenstyne versus Cthulhu?" And he wrote back, and he was like, "What?" And I said, "The Monster of Blackenstein versus Cthulhu," and he was like, "Hell yeah!" And then I said, "Do you want to co-write it with me?" And then the phone rang, right? Then he calls me,
Ah,
and people, a lot of people know this, some people don't, that H.P. Lovecraft was horribly
was
racist.
racist. Yes.
And so I was like, okay, originally my all my monsters are the heroes, but
Mhm.
now I'm like, oh, I want to bring in some monsters that are not the heroes. They truly do represent the forces of evil.
Oh,
So
for sure.
there's going to be Cthulhu. There's going to be there's going to be some shit people are going to like. There's going to be people who absolutely hate me
Hmm.
when this comes out. Um, I remember I tell this story all the time, man. I remember a friend of mine. He had two cassette tapes with him. One was Easy Ease, Easy Does It, and the other
Hmm.
was NWA Straight Outta Compton. And he was like, "Yo, man, you got to listen to this." And he put it in, and I was like, "Psh, man, that's terrible. That's not going to go anywhere, right?" And because I was Public Enemy, ride or die Public Enemy.
Oh
That's what I
yeah,
loved.
Bomb Squad.
Yeah. Um, I quickly came to appreciate NWA and Eazy-E, but I was just like, yo, man, even for me, these dudes cuss too much. This is like, and I never felt so conservative as I did the first, especially with Eazy-E's album, right? And I was like, but now that's what I want to evoke from people. I want people to
Yeah,
be like, I don't know if I should be reading this. I don't know
yeah,
how I should feel. Should I be offended by this?
yeah,
And I'm like, maybe, or
yeah,
maybe you should realize that the truth is in these pages.
yeah. Because we used to sneak away to listen to NWA.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they're like, let's go
And
over here so our moms don't hear out the window.
and for me, it wasn't even NWA because I'm for me, it was Richard Pryor albums or
Ah,
Red
yeah.
Fox albums, or and this is a guy who sadly a lot of people don't remember. There's a guy named Blowfly,
Hmm.
um, and Blowfly, for anyone who doesn't know, he was a musician and he would wear this mask. He looked like a luchador, right? And he took all these classic R&B songs. He was like the X-rated Weird Al Yankovic, right? So like what was it? Like one of his he did a version of sitting on the dock of the bay, but it was called shitting off the dock of the bay, right? And it's you know when you're like 12,
Oh yeah,
that's funny.
yeah.
and
Of
and
course.
and um and so part of what I wanted to do also was like, oh, I wanted to capture that. um like I don't know if I should be listening to this. I mean, I remember Richard Pryor albums, and it's like, yo, wait a sec. I know I'm not supposed to be listening to this right now, you know?
Hmm.
And same with a lot of people don't realize how dirty Red Fox was.
Yeah.
Red Fox was the same way. And so and Blackenstein isn't particularly dirty. There's no sex in it. There's no profanity in it. It's ridiculously violent.
Hmm.
Um, but it's also like,
Or as the summary says, it was considered too offensive
yeah,
or too violent by publishers.
yes. Um, what it is though I think more than anything is it's not more than anything because this is what my intention was I wanted to take a lot of the things that I don't like or that bother me or that offended me, and I wanted to turn it into something that would entertain me, right?
Mhm.
So I talk about how much I hated the movie Blackenstein. I hated it so much I had to turn it into something
That you liked.
that I liked. I had to take the pain, the sorrow, and the anger of every time I see an unarmed person killed by the police or killed by racists, or just the overall dehumanization of people of color. I had to take that and I had to do exactly, and again, I'm not comparing myself to him, but I had to do what Richard Pryor did.
Hmm.
I had to find a way to make it entertaining and palatable for me. And if some people are entertained by this or can appreciate it, or if nothing else, if it can just make you just go, okay, I can let go for a few minutes. I can just be distracted for a few minutes because that's ultimately we all need some sort of distraction, right?
Yeah.
Um, and even I need it. But for me, that distraction comes more from creating the stuff than every now and then I'll see something that's like, okay, yeah, no, this is exactly what I needed right now.
Yeah.
But usually I'm too busy, too focused on I gotta make something. It's just the way I'm wired.
Mm. That's amazing. Sir, I appreciate you doing this with me.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. The book, I can't wait to I actually have it in my hands. Uh, Obviously, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, especially because you've always been somebody, definitely a comic book writer that has taken upon themselves to give a crossroads between entertainment and social commentary, all while basically just keeping us reading and reading more. So I appreciate that wholeheartedly.
I appreciate I appreciate you appreciating that, and I appreciate the appreciation on top of the appreciation. It's I haven't done hardly any podcasts since last year when I did the death of Bobby Hart.
Mhm.
Um, and but with this project, I've done more podcasts with more people that I know, but I haven't really sat down and chopped it up with them.
Yeah,
And it's like, yo, this is like I've been living in a bubble for really for a year, and now I'm coming back out of it, and there's the stuff that you're doing, there's stuff that you know there's some cats out there that are doing some really
oh yeah,
interesting
Blur
and good
Without
stuff.
Fear.
Oh yeah,
I saw you with was it J Penumbra?
Jay Penumbra, yeah. And I won't speak for any other creators, but what I will say is that for myself, that level of appreciation is so deep because it's man, Blurred Without Fear posted something the other day. He was on fire. I don't know if you saw it. He
Mhm.
was talking
Oh,
about
about
like,
Black Andy? Yes.
yeah, and people say I don't support Black Indie, and he's like, bam, and he's just it's like
He started
mic
throwing
drop
them
after
out.
mic drop. Yep.
He put out a
And
challenge to everybody.
it got to a point where I was like, yo, I haven't heard of this one. I haven't, and I'm writing stuff down.
Oh
I was
yeah.
like, and and in fact, one of the things just arrived in the mail. I ordered it that night, and it just arrived in the mail. I'll read it in the next day or so. But I was like, I'm to a point now where like I'm turning to cats like all of you to
Yeah,
help me see what's out there, right?
for
It's
sure.
not even about hyping what I'm doing, but like, man, there are so many amazing creatives out there right now.
Tons.
And I see I'm in a very fortunate position. I've worked at the higher levels for companies like Marvel and DC, but my heart is always going to be indie, right? And to me, it's like I love seeing this stuff. I love seeing, Greg Anderson and Lise posted something on Facebook about we're all going to be in Boston together,
Yeah, y'all about to be in
and
Boston.
yeah,
Comics and Color
yeah,
Festival.
something, yeah, and he was like, I don't understand how I got here, and I was like, you got here by being dope, bro.
Yeah.
Like I love Anansi the Were Spider.
Hmm.
I love everything Greg does. I love everything Greg Burnham does. Newton Lilavoie, Jason Reeves, Ray Anthony Height, you name it. right?
Mhm.
Man, Stephanie Williams is on fire
Fire.
right now. And every time I see Stephanie, I just say the same thing. I say, yo, I love what you're doing. And if anyone messes with you, you come get your old uncle. And you know what I'm saying? And it's I this is I know we need to wrap it up, but I'll say this,
Nah,
man.
it's a community.
It is a community. And but the thing is that the community was so small for so long, right?
It was.
And when I started really seriously doing conventions, this was the late 90s, and it was like me and Jeremy and Robert Love and their brother Maurice was there. It was Alex Simmons. There was just a handful of us creators. And and if you saw someone at you saw another black person at a convention, first of all, you never saw any women. You only saw dudes, and they would literally they'd walk by. They didn't want to be seen. There
Mm,
was we were afraid to be seen. I wouldn't say it's all of us, but there was a lot of people that were afraid to be seen in public. They were afraid to be both a nerd and be black, to be a blurred. And now I see it, so much of it, and I'm just like, it's I sometimes I get really emotional, and especially with Robert and Jeremy Love, because we go like they're my OGs, and Keith Knight, and it's just like, yeah, can you remember when it was just us? You remember when, and it was like, and it was just us for so long that it felt like it was always going to be just us.
yeah.
And then what happened, in part because of the internet, we started, meeting people like, okay, we were doing West Coast shows. Turns out there's all these cats doing East Coast
Those
shows,
shows.
other cats doing shows in the Midwest or Southeastern United States. And suddenly we all started meeting, but also the just the climate changed, the industry itself changed, and suddenly more people realize you can just put it out yourself,
Yeah.
because Marvel might not want you, or DC might not want you, or Image may say no, but that ain't going to stop you. That shouldn't stop you from doing what you have to do in your heart and soul,
Oh, that's
right?
a fact.
So yeah. That just means a lot to me. And again, so I sit back and I watch I don't comment that often,
Yeah.
but I watch videos that folks are posting, and listen, and really it helps me to recognize the fact that, um man, that this industry is like, I can't tell you how many people I've seen come into the industry since I've been here, right?
Mhm.
And some of them were, like Al Letson. Man, I've known Al forever, and it was like, and he finally got that break, and I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
yes,
That's a terrific.
yeah, and Morgan Hampton got his break, and again, there's so many folks out there, and I just appreciate the fact that, you know that there are people out there that are not only talking about us, but they're also talking to us,
Mm.
right? And that, because this shit's lonely, man.
Yeah.
I will sometimes go days where it's like I don't talk to another human being. I'll do some texting or emailing, but it's like,
Yeah.
and I'm in my cave for a year working on a project. I don't know if people are going to like it or not,
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just fingers crossed. And again, you and Jay Penumbra and Blurred Without Fear, and there's others, Black Comics Lords.
Yeah.
You're all in your own way providing a lifeline that you all know it, but you also don't know it. And you know how I know you don't know it? Because none of us know what we're doing, right? Like someone like I talk to Keith Knight all the time about stuff, or I'll talk to the Love
Yeah.
Brothers, or I'll, you know, and I'm like, yo, you guys don't know how much you mean to me, and they'll be like, yo, stop. Well,
Yeah.
we don't want to hear it. But it really does have this. There's nothing better than knowing that you are not completely alone,
Absolutely.
and we've all experienced it in one way or another, at one time or another. And the fact that there's a community here now, that like a real community,
Hmm.
um yeah, I'm probably start crying in a few minutes.
Look,
So, but
it's bigger than your wildest dreams. You know, like
yeah,
I always say, after 2020, as bad as it got,
yeah,
it also allowed a lot of people to talk to one another that you wouldn't necessarily talk to.
yeah, yeah.
And those of us that love comics all just started talking about comics with each other. And then we just got the gall to be like, what if I just like reach out to, to David Walker? Let's see if let's see
Yeah.
if he wants to talk about Bitterroot. Like, let's just
Yeah.
talk to him about Bitterroot. That's all we want to talk to him about. And then it's like when you get the reply, like you're almost like jumping up out of your chair, like, oh shit, look at my email.
It's, man, look, I did a years ago, 30 years ago, I made a documentary, it was about Blaxploitation, and I got to interview most of my childhood heroes, Jim
Mhm.
Kelly, Jim Brown, Fred Williamson,
Yeah,
Rudy Ray Moore, and I'll never forget what it felt like when they said yes. And
yeah,
when I was invited into their homes and I got to do the interviews, and with some of those folks, I managed to maintain a relationship over the years. But more importantly, and I tell this all the time, Ray Anthony Height posted something on social media a few weeks ago, and he said, "Who are the nicest comic book professionals you've ever met?" Right? And I said in no particular order, and I still mean no particular order. It was Walt Simonson,
hmm
it was Will Eisner,
hmm
and it was Dwayne McDuffie. And Dwayne McDuffie, Dwayne McDuffie and Will Eisner especially, I wouldn't be in comics if it wasn't for them. And it was how they treated me when I was trying to break into comics.
yeah,
And Dwayne was like, you know, all I can say is based on my experiences with him and the conversations we had, and it was there was a moment when him and I were talking, and this was, you know 20 years ago, if not more. Um, and I was like, yo, this I think like this guy, right? Like I have ideas that up until now everyone has been telling me, oh, that would never work, right?
right.
Because you got to be careful who you tell your shit to, right? Um, and Dwayne is telling me stuff that I was like, wait a sec, he thinks this way, and he's where he's at, and more importantly, he's talking to me he's talking to me like a peer, and I always felt like, I should be worshiping at your feet, but he wouldn't let me do that, right?
hmm
And I think about that all the time. I think about, like, because I've also seen creators who just treat people like shit, right? And it's like, look, if you can't treat people decently, then don't go out. Don't
Yeah,
go to conventions. Don't sit behind the table. If you're going to be grumpy and grouchy, go home,
yep.
right? But I do. I think about that a lot. I think about, I don't know who's going to be the next great comics journalist slash podcaster, documentarian. I don't know who's going to be the next great writer, the next great artist. It's not for me to say.
Yeah.
All I can say is, like, just try to treat people with a little bit of respect. Try to treat people the way you would want to be treated.
hmm
And I know you've come across some of those people who don't do that,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah,
And I'm like, yep, I'm never going to work with you. Every now and then someone will reach out, like, we should work together, and I'm like, yeah, we should. Let's work it out. And then, click, and I go silent. It's like,
yeah,
I don't want to deal with that. So just keep doing what you're doing, and know that, you're doing the Lord's work. I know I sound facetious when I say it, but I mean it, and
yeah.
it's very important to a lot of us.
Yeah, no, look, I don't take it too far in between just
Yeah,
doing this work. I have, of course, a love for comics. That's probably why I talk about it so much. But the fact that I get to talk about it with people that I admire makes it even that much more of a big project for me. I go into it studying it, researching it,
yeah,
and it makes the interviews that much more compelling.
yeah.
Yeah. So
No, and that's always appreciated, man. That's always, like, you're talking to a research junkie, man.
I know. We just had a
And
John Carpenter talk
yeah,
for about a half
yeah.
hour.
But it is again, I can't say this. Here's the thing about Blackenstein, the Monster of Blackenstein, even more than Bitter Root. This will sound crazy, and I've said it to a couple people. Like it's crazy because people get what I'm doing. They
Oh
get
yeah.
it, right? And I'm like, yo, like as much as I love Bitter Root and I love the response that it's gotten, it's like, okay, I was part of the reason Chuck and I were getting this because we were working with Sanford, and
Hmm.
Sanford is he's a monster, he's a beast in and of himself. But and Marcello, who I'm working with now, is a monster, but people don't know who Marcello is, right?
Yeah.
They're looking at it, they go, yo, this art is great,
Hmm.
but um, this is the craziest thing. This is the craziest project I've done, and I admit it. I took a movie that I hated, uh, turned turned it into something that I would like, which is a dark satire that is an homage to classic monster movies,
Yeah.
blaxploitation, and a socio-political comment, all in 24 pages, right?
Mhm.
So I just appreciate it, man.
Look, I appreciate you appreciating what you've been appreciating because you be putting out. Mr. Walker, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
I thank you for your time. I
Yeah.
thank you, of course, for the work that you've done and for the work that you're putting out. So I hope that I get the chance to talk about more projects with you in the future.
Oh, I'll be pestering you. Don't worry about it.
All
Don't
right.
worry about it. You'll be pestering me, man.
Not a problem. So for everybody here at the Facts Project, David F. Walker, obviously, the Monster of Blackenstyne is still live on Kickstarter, so you can get your hands on that within the next 11 days, if
Something
I'm
like that.
if I'm
Yeah.
looking at that correctly.
Yeah.
So stretch goals are out there. We've already passed the campaign goal. Let's get a little bit further because in the root of indie comics, there's always great stories out there for everyone. So thank you once again, and we'll see you guys next time. We are out.